As one of the main knowledge centers in the world, our concern is to always be an innovative institution, both for our students and for society as a whole. The webinars offered daily by the schools and units of FGV are a way to promote the exchange of knowledge in diverse areas about relevant and current subjects, information, research, plurality of ideas, high-level debate, all of this happening for free online and daily. Welcome to one more FGV webinar. The broadcast will start soon. The statements expressed by Fundação Getulio Vargas employees and guests who take part in online events and broadcasts exclusively represent their opinions and not necessarily FGV's institutional position. Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Good morning in Brazil, good evening in China. Welcome to the fourth seminar about the Brazil-China dialogue, which is organized here by the Center for Brazil-China Studies at FGV. And today we will speak about the role of financial integration and development initiatives within this webinar. And I will start reading a disclaimer that was requested by Fundação Getulio Vargas. So I would ask all the participants at the end to please express their okay. The statements expressed by Fundação Getulio Vargas employees and guests who take part in online events and broadcasts exclusively represent their opinions and not necessarily FGV's institutional position. We also reiterate that everyone present here spontaneously agreed to participate in this event and to authorize the use of their name, voice, and image, besides assigning the copyrights related to their exhibition for this broadcast, which will be available later on FGV's official channels. To continue with this transmission, we ask you to express your agreement with this. Thank you. So today's subject is very interesting. It's related here to the Silk Road, and China has already signed 206 cooperation documents with more than 272 countries and 32 international organizations within the Belt and Road Initiative. So from 2013 to 2020, the commerce of products between these countries has grown in approximately $350 billion with an accumulated Congress of 9 trillion over that period. This project started being organized in 2013 and was first mentioned by Xi Jinping in his visit to Kazakhstan. Besides economic integration, cooperation, multilateralism between countries through peace and cooperation and mutual benefits and learning experiences, opening and inclusion, this also means the economic integration within this project. It's important to speak of economic integration and financial integration, which is something we will address here. So the objective here is to deepen the financial cooperation between countries to develop the markets in Asia, which I'm sure we'll speak about today, and also with the use of the Chinese currency, joint ventures to work with the Asian Development Bank, and to conduct negotiations to establish cooperations, operationalize the Belt and Road Fund, and also promote the cooperation between China and other countries in Southeast Asia, cooperation between governments, financial institutions, within the Belt and Road Initiative and strengthen the financial cooperation in terms of regulations and efficient mechanisms and administration instruments between these countries. To speak about this event today, we have the presence of our lecturers. Ms. Song Xiaoyang, who is the director of the Law School of Shanghai University of Finances and Economics. Mrs. Yin Ying, attorney and associate at Guantao Law Firm. We also have with us Sergio Sushodolski, president of the Development Bank of Minas Gerais, BDMG, and Professor Carlos Ragazzo, professor at FGV. So welcome. And we will get started now with the presentation of Ms. Song Xiaoyang. Mrs. Song, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all the hard work and organization. It's a very good opportunity for us to be here, even online, but it really is a good opportunity to meet with all of you to share some opinions. So here, this topic, what we will discuss, some issue about financial legal cooperation, right? Okay. Financial market is really very interesting and a complicated market. There are so many diversities and challenges among the different countries' financial market. So why do you need financial legal cooperation? Maybe the first issue first is to discuss what are the fundamental functions of finance. My understanding, maybe the functions may include, for example, to bridge the money demand and the supply. It's the basic function. Somebody need money, somebody have money, but how to channel the demand and the supply? That's the function of finance. And when somebody has money, how to deal with this money? Maybe trade, maybe investment. So the second fundamental function of finance may be to facilitate international or internal trade and investment. And the third one may be to cover the transaction risks. For example, Chinese money, renminbi, Brazil's currency, between our two countries' currency, there is foreign exchange rate, right? So there are foreign exchange rate, there are the foreign exchange risks. And of course, the risks also include some interest rate risks. And how to cooperate? There are so many countries. Just now I have said, the financial markets among the countries are so different. So how to cooperate? Maybe there are three channels. First, through central banks cooperation. Second, financial regulatory agencies cooperation. And the third one, not the least one, financial legal research and legal services communication and cooperation. Central banks cooperation. So I don't know up to now whether in Brazil and China, there have been already this kind of agreement, bilateral swap agreement. I don't know. So this is one important channel to support central banks cooperation. Will this kind of agreement, the currencies, the sovereign currencies payment facility could be supported. And through central banks cooperation, the different countries can cooperate to do many things. For example, combined intervention on exchange rate crisis. Because many countries now, they have the floating exchange rate system. So that means in the foreign exchange market, the price, the currency price is always floating. So maybe this one way for different countries' central bank could cooperate to do combined intervention. And the third one, central bank could cooperate on systemic risks prevention, mitigation, and resolution. After 2008 crisis, many countries have paid attention on this way because systemic risks could induce one country, even the world economic crisis. So how to deal with this kind of risk? Maybe central banks cooperation is one resolution. Well, sorry. Okay. My computer has faced with some difficulty, some problems. However, even sovereign currencies swap agreement could improve two countries' payment facility, could avoid foreign exchange risks. However, up to now, there are still many difficulties. For example, China had signed some agreements, but the implemented issue up to now is not very smooth. And combined intervention on exchange rate crisis, there are still some challenges. For example, responsibility ratio among the countries. We know to intervene the market is means to make some balance between market freedom and economic safety. Okay, countries choose to make some cooperation. However, who burden a bigger responsibility and how to burden? About systemic risk prevention, mitigation, and resolution, there is the need for cooperation. For example, data sharing, joint resolution, and still there is the problem. How to share data? We know in many countries, the data privacy protection is also a very important issue. So how to balance the cooperation need and the privacy protection? So this is the first issue, central banks cooperation. The second channel, financial regulatory agencies cooperation. Okay. Still, after 2008 crisis, the many countries have seen the need for these channels cooperation. Okay. So if the countries accept Basel Agreement about, for example, double approval principle to improve communication. This is one important channel. And the next issue to be paid attention maybe how to make a good cooperation on financial entities access and how to make a good information sharing mechanism. And still the same issue, how to think about the regulatory responsibility burden. And the last channel, financial legal research and legal services communication and cooperation. Just above, I have said that there are so many complexities, complexity of finance, complexity of financial law. There are different legal systems. Even in China, some laws have adopted, maybe we can say civil law countries, principles, suggestions, and some laws may have adopted common law countries, principles, cases, opinions. So it's very different. There are so many countries in Belt and Road. There are different legal systems in these countries. So there is the strong need to make a strong communication and cooperation. So if I could give some suggestions, first one, financial legal services training is very important. We know in China, the financial market really improved very fast. However, the need for financial legal services is so strong. So the need for training is also very strong. And among these countries, because the need for communication is very strong, so how to improve, advance exchanging students and scholars and lawyers? Maybe next year, all the countries open again, we can do many workers in this area. Okay. Thank you very much. Professor?
Thank you very much, Ms. Song. Congratulations for your presentation.
Thank you.
I will speak in Portuguese, of course.
Agora. Your presentation addressed a subject that I think is very relevant, which is the cooperation between the central banks. Brazil signed, along with China, a bilateral agreement of swap currencies, and in 2013, it was a 3-year agreement. So it lasted until 2016, and unfortunately in 2016, it was not renewed. So we don't have this swaps agreement currently with China. China has it now with more than 40 countries around the world. So we are also suffering with the fact that we do not have an offshore financial center for the Chinese currency. And this means that the financial transactions with China are now conducted in the dollar. So this means high transactional costs, but I think that we can address this after the other presentations, but it is a very relevant subject. So continuing here with our webinar, I would like to call Ms. Ying to speak. Mrs. Ying, the floor is yours.
Okay, Thanks very much for Mr. Cotterell's introduction. The topic of my speech is promoting financial integration with cross-border asset securitization. As a member of one of the top 50 law firms in China, which has been involved into legal businesses with respect to the Belt and Road and Brazil, I am very pleased to have a speech with this topic in this seminar. So let's go to page 2. Okay, this is the content of the slides. As it indicates, we will focus on the foreign-related factors of cross-border asset securitization. The Chinese bond market consists of two main components, the interbank bond market and the exchange bond market. Asset securitization is among the financial instruments for fundraiser and the fixed income products for investors. Currently, there are 3 types of asset securitization products in these two components, namely credit asset securitization, enterprise asset securitization, and asset-backed notes. Cross-border asset securitization is defined as an asset securitization issued in China under Chinese law, but with foreign-related factors. In a context of asset securitization, the so-called foreign factor refers to any of the following situations. The parties are foreign entities, the underlying assets are foreign, and the investors are foreign entities. In the case of enterprise asset securitization, for example, the participants are foreign entities, and the focus is usually on the originators and the credit enhancers as foreign entities. As shown in the table of this slide, according to the current relevant regulations, foreign entities can issue enterprise asset securitization products in the exchange bond market and asset-backed notes in the interbank bond market. And the originators of credit asset securitization are financial institutions, but foreign financial institutions are excluded. Therefore, in short, in order to raise funds for a Belt and Road project, it is possible for a domestic financial institution to issue credit asset securitization products in the interbank bond market, while foreign entities may issue enterprise asset securitization products in exchange bond market or issue asset-backed notes in the interbank bond market. If the credit enhancement of the asset securitization product is provided by a foreign entity, the foreign lawyer shall issue a clear legal opinion on the good standing of the credit enhancer, its creditworthiness, and whether the legal and effective internal authorization to execute the legal documents related to the credit enhancement is obtained, etc. The Chinese lawyer shall then issue a legal opinion on the above on the basis of the legal opinion of the foreign lawyer. As for the legal documents related to credit enhancement, since the legal effects of credit enhancement methods, such as guarantee, liquidity support, and commitment to pay difference, are recognized differently in different jurisdictions. It is recommended to explicitly agree in such credit enhancements legal documents that the law of China shall be the governing law. In addition, as it may happen that the cash generated from the underlying assets will flow from abroad once the foreign credit enhancer performs its obligation. Foreign exchange issue must be among the critical concerns. The uncertainty of some steps, time to be spent, and operational risks should be considered in advance. Further, appropriate measures can be arranged to mitigate the risks, such as taking use of the assets owned by the credit enhancer and located within the territory of China for purpose of performing the credit enhancement in priority. This table shown in this slide is a comparison between the requirements of enterprise asset securitization and asset-backed notes. It reflects that there is no substantial difference in the requirements for the underlying assets between enterprise asset securitization and asset-backed notes. In its nature, the underlying assets of asset securitization products are continuous and stable cash flows based on transactions. From the legal perspective, transactions mean contractual legal relationships. There are three elements required in the contractual legal relationship. They are the contractual parties, i.e. the creditor and the debtor, the object, that is to say, the subject matter, and the content, which means the legal relationship. Since the way to raise funds with asset securitization products is to transfer the underlying asset to the issuer, and as the consideration of such transfer to be paid by the issuer with the capital which is invested by the investors, the focus of attention includes the debtor and its obligation to perform the debt, the validity of the contract, the transferability of the contract, and so on. If the underlying assets have a large single claim amount and the debtor is less diversified, the good standing and the creditworthiness of the debtor is quite important in their asset securitization project. In case that the debtor is a foreign entity, the Chinese lawyers need to hire foreign lawyers to conduct legal due diligence and issue relevant legal opinions, as Chinese lawyers have no license to perform the legal DD and issue such opinions in the jurisdiction other than PRC. When it comes to the validity of the contract, the conclusion in this regard is usually made pursuant to the governing law of the contract. The governing law can usually be agreed by the parties themselves, or in the absence of such agreement, the governing law must be determined in conjunction with the law of the places of registration of the parties. If the agreed governing law is not the PRC law, or if no governing law has been agreed upon, then a foreign lawyer must be engaged to render an opinion on the validity of the contract based on the law specified according to some rules within the framework of international law. To determine the assignability of contractual claims, precisely, first of all, is to determine whether the contractual terms restricts or prohibits the creditor from assigning the claim to a third party, and whether this assignment has legal effect on the debtor. Opinions regarding both above and based on the law applicable to the contract are required. For contractual claims that can be assigned, the creditor must legally obtain internal authorization for the purpose of assigning the contractual claim to a third party. The determination of whether a valid internal authorization has been obtained is subject to the law applicable to the creditor. For assignable contract claims, it is also necessary to prevent and avoid the possibility that the creditor has assigned the claim several times or may still subsequently assign the claim separately, thus defeating the purpose of the issuer to be assigned the claim. Take the receivable as an example. The assignment of receivables under Chinese law can be registered as an assignment. But this registration shall not have confrontational effect or priority over other right holders. However, whether the assignment of claims needs to be publicized, the manner of publicization, and whether such publicizations has confrontational effect against third parties may vary greatly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Thus, the Chinese lawyer may engage a foreign lawyer to issue a legal opinion accordingly. The transfer of contract claims is from outside China to China. The foreign exchange matters that may be involved needs to be considered and handled with in advance so as not to affect the timely payments to investors. To avoid exchange rate losses due to exchange rate fluctuations, it is recommended that the currency of the underlying asset recovery during the duration of the asset securitization product is the same as the settlement currency agreed in the underlying asset transaction contract. Generally speaking, there are four main paths for foreign investors to invest in asset securitization products in Chinese bond market, namely qualified foreign institutional investors, RMB qualified foreign institutional investors, direct investment in the interbank bond market, and northbound trading and the bond connect. Foreign investors may select one or more paths with the assistance of Chinese lawyers. Okay, these are what I would like to share with you in this seminar. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Congratulations for your presentation. This is very relevant. Falando em português, eu acho que algumas coisas que foram abordadas nessa apresentação são importantes.
So what was talked about here is extremely important for Brazil because there's a recognition of how it has been done mainland and offshore. There's a lack of knowledge about how these programs work, the FYI and MMB, because previously the Chinese government used to put in place quotas for this, but now the Chinese government has abandoned the quota system. So, but it's a theme that is very little studied. So it's so important to talk about this here and to know that there are possibilities to fund and use these currencies. And later we can actually talk about this issue further. It's important to remind all the participants that you can send your questions here through the Q&A app through the system. And after the talks, these questions will be answered. So continuing here our debate today, I will give the floor to Sergio Sudoches, who has had his experience in China as well. And he's the head of the president of the Development Bank of Minas Gerais. You have the floor. Thank you, Sergio. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Should I use Portuguese or English?
Acredito que a organização do evento nós estamos fazendo em português em função de ter uma intérprete, mas se você se sentir mais confortável.
We have an interpreter here, but if you feel more comfortable to do it in English, it's up to you. If most of the audience is Brazilian, 90% here is speak Portuguese. So I've prepared a presentation in English, but to do it in Portuguese, it would be a little bit difficult. So, but anyways, I would like to thank the organization of this event, to congratulate the Getulio Vargas organization, the professor, who's a good friend. It's an honor to be here on this panel with all the others present. I'm going to talk a little bit about the opening of the development banks, a general reference about the development banks. So we're going to move on to the next slide soon. We're going to talk about the development banks in Brazil, from Minas Gerais, for example, the international agendas that are aligned, and also about the new institutions, the new financial institutions of development that are present in China, and also about the Asian Bank of Investment Bank. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the economy in China and our partnerships. So you can see here kind of like the menu of what this presentation is going to be. So you can see here that this agenda guides our work from the, sorry to interrupt you. The organization of the event has asked you to enable translation to the Portuguese channel. Below your presentation, there is a little icon, globe, where it says interpretation. So you need to enable the channel, the Portuguese channel. Sorry about this. I think now it's working. I think now it's working. Thank you, Sergio. Sorry to interrupt you. All right, so let's go. Next slide.
Falando aqui do contexto e o papel dos bancos de desenvolvimento.
So speaking about the context and the role of development banks, on the next slide here now, doing a little recap, a little in retrospect, we can see a big change in terms of the economy post-COVID. The point of sustainability, sustainable post-COVID recovery is at the heart of this presentation. The idea that the whole economic system needs to be re-examined. We need to go deep into it, and the anticipation of this system has been accelerated due to the pandemic. We need to focus on the being back with the economy and the sustainable institutions, and the principles of these other organizations are at the heart of these strategies of the companies and the governments. We can call it shareholder capitalism, as the professor wrote about it, and Masukato wrote about it in 2020. There is also here the presentation of a strategy with 3 different pillars for sustainable recovery, that it needs to be green, smart, and fair. So the theme of reduction of subsidies for fossil fuels and low carbon economy is an important theme, but investments are needed of $2.3 trillion for the next 10 years. So it is a great challenge. It's a crisis that has demonstrated the need for a digital infrastructure, the theme of social distancing, and all these new regulatory standards. And they need to be fair due to the increase of inequality related to the long-term growth, which is a concerning theme for various economies where inflation is growing and also stagnation is taking place. The next slide. We have 3 international agendas that guide our work. The 2030 agenda that bring these, we have here the Paris Agreement from 2015, and the financing agenda for financing for development. Now, the challenges for the development of these agendas to reach these goals, we have here from 5 to 7 trillion required to fully finance the 2030 agenda, for example. And we need to work with local and regional governments. So of course, a subnational development bank is necessary to act here. On the next slide, we talk about the traditional roles of development banks. And of course, here we have the reference of the World Bank that was created after World War II, long-term financing, and applying credit for vulnerable sectors, and also currently, for example, we need to help the economy recover in a moment of instability. However, development banks are becoming great platforms that can identify regional priorities. They can act as partners with banks that are regional banks and etc. They help to mobilize private capital, not just for credit, but also in structuring projects. This is extremely important, especially when we think about structuring projects in states, and especially small municipalities. They can act as articulators and anchors of these projects, not just for credit, but structuring projects in private capital where it can be mobilized. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit about China and the new institutions for development. One more slide. China and the world. Here we can have a dimension of the process of development and growth of China with some key numbers here, some key figures. Until 2020, we can see incredible growth here, multiplying more than 1,500 times with a fiscal revenue that is extremely important here. We can see a leap of per capita of over, and also the foreign investment of millions of dollars here. Very relevant. There's a very relevant increase here, and very impactful, and the figures speak for themselves. A country that organizes its priorities and defend a strategy, they implement, assess, and report. So they have a central structure in order to do this, with the MDRC and the National Reform and Development Commission that is present in various economic agents and also state agents, Chinese state agents. Now here we can see the growth of China in Asia in general, creating important opportunities, business opportunities for Brazil. So we need here to have some parameters to compare with traditional partners that are present here. So if we look at 2021, for each dollar that was exported from Brazil to the US and Argentina together, Brazil exported $2.3 to China. Brazil has exported more to Hong Kong and Taiwan than to the UK, for instance. Brazil has exported more to South Korea than to France and Switzerland together. And China represents more than 1/3 of Brazil's exports. So it's a phenomenon that, you know, when you look at Asia in general, South Korea, etc. So the level of export is incomparable. For example, when we look here, so anyways, now when it comes to the dilemma of the rivalry between China and the US, we can do a parallel with the old Cold War, where peace was impossible and war was improbable. But in the relations with China and the US, the war is even more improbable. There is an interdependency, an economic interdependency that's extremely strong, where we talk about decoupling, but it's still very difficult with interdependency. When we look at various sectors and the huge stock of multinationals in China, there is a solid relationship that brings opportunities for all. So, but anyways, there's a big risk here when we look at this situation specifically. Even though there are flexibilities, there is a dispute for world leadership. Next slide. Here we see the future of China and Brazil, the development of China that is able to bring the model of growth, its growth model for investment is, for fixed capital, is huge. The energy crisis, environmental aspects. We can see how there's a lot of investment in renewables that has put China in a leading position in the world. China also represents 72% of the demand of hard commodities, especially iron ore, which is extremely important for Minas Gerais, for instance. And also the demographic, with the growth of population reaching zero after decades of a restrictive policy in terms of birth control. Brazil is also one of the greatest countries for investing in agriculture that produces very interesting results. Their relations has exceeded $1 trillion, and China has also become the main destination for export and also origin for export of and import of Brazil. This impacts the agriculture greatly. It's important to remember that the first decade of the first century, the US and Argentina were still Brazil's main commercial partners. So there is a change here that is quite recent. So it's important to look at this to understand the current trajectory. Now here, we have here this table of credit of this bank that was born in 2014 when the agreement was signed, and it has started to be taken place. Now this bank emits debts in the internal market in China and in terms of international agencies as well, and also Japanese agencies. Its presence in Brazil, this wallet is extremely important. So there are some projects for investments. So we can see that the bank has started to make great investments. Now the next slide. This next bank that was born and started operating in 2015. And well, here the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And in 2015, there has been an acquisition of more, including more than 100 countries. Now this has a more global role. Recently, with the support of the Brazilian Association of Development, the ratification. So anyways, it's a bank that is operational in Brazil starting now, since just a few weeks ago. So it's a bank where Brazil has a less significant relevant presence, but it can have more relevant participation in Brazil. Therefore, Brazil is opening financially a little bit more, where this 8 great multilateral banks are in China, and there is a great investment infrastructure. Anyways, this is a new reality that is imposed in terms of great multilateral institutions that are being headquartered in China, which are called the new multilateral financial relationships. So Brazil has a great role in being part of this. The General Counsel and the president of this other bank. Now, quickly here about Brazil's institutions of development. I will talk about BNG, the Development Bank of Minas Gerais. It will complete 60 years soon. And it acts in more than 90% of these cities in Minas Gerais. We have over 30 million clients and a portfolio of 6 billion approximately. Here we have our 5-year strategy, the idea to focus more on regional local development and to maximize the impact of development in Minas Gerais, but at the same time to observe with responsibly the financial sustainability of the institution. We have a commitment with global agendas, as we can see here, the agenda of related to the Paris Agreement and also related to the just development in general, credit, emission of sustainable credits, and also in resources and the digital platforms. So this is essential for a 21st century bank. Here you can see an overview of references of our great partners, the European Bank of Investment, which is headquartered in Luxembourg. We have been renewing our relationships. And here you can see the signature of the contract in 2019, and renewable energy and energy efficiency. And you can see one of the least developed regions in Minas Gerais, in fact. Here in the next slide, our action, our presence in small companies, especially during this pandemic, many programs of solidarity, in specific areas like tourism, for example, but also in health and gender finance. So funding and financing related in gender, where women has at least a great percentage of capital. Now here we are referencing our presence in municipalities and in smart cities, sustainable cities. We also act in structuring of projects. We have over 400 contracts and a very aligned relationship with other projects. Here we have a general framework where we can see our credit portfolio. We have various goals, and as I have mentioned, we have this published framework on the website. We have an independent opinion here that has allowed us to have partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank to have a successful mission in New York. Actually, we were able to do that in the organ of the stock exchange of New York. And it was successful. Here we have an overview of our foreign partners, of development agencies, some that are here. You can see that have been in local and foreign funding. Now here's some of our international partners. The Finance in Common. I am here speaking with you directly from Rome, where this meeting is happening. And of course, yesterday, many important people have participated. And also the Aliança de Desarrollo, which is our alliance that has been launched in partnership with the agency, the other partners and agencies of development, in which various institutions of development are present in the Caribbean, where we can exchange knowledge and experiences in order to further this alliance of development. Here there's a reference of other events we have participated in these 3 years of management, including with the BRICS summit in November 2019, with the participation of various partners, especially in China, with the presence of the president of the IB, of strategy, and various other international events. So the theme of financial integration is extremely important, especially in terms of supporting the sustainable development, green, intelligent, smart, and that aims to decrease inequalities. It is a general perspective, but it needs to be acted. It needs to act locally, which is where we act as a.
Next slide, please. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here with us, participating today in such an important series of the Brazil-China seminar, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you for your presentation. Another subject that you addressed here are these multilateral institutions that support investments, infrastructure, sustainable investments in productive sectors. And it's interesting to observe that, as you mentioned in your presentation, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has many member countries. I believe there are 147 projects that the bank has funded so far, 45 billion. And so the New Development Bank, which is the BRICS Bank, has also been working in the same sense. And I have 67 projects at 25 billion. So that's quite a high number. And you mentioned this partnership, which is important. I would also add not just this bank, but the China Development Bank, which is, of course, in China and works in financing, specifically focused on investments, not so much in the infrastructure area, but that also works with more long-term projects. The Export and Import Bank of China that works in financing, and the Development Bank in China that works more in agriculture. So these are all development banks, and they are also present here in Brazil with projects of their interest, especially relating to infrastructure. So thank you very much, and we will now receive your questions. Please feel free to send your questions so we can submit them and ask our lecturers at the end. So now I would like to invite Professor Carlos Ragazzo, Professor of Fundação Getulio Vargas, to give us his presentation. Welcome, Professor. Well, thank you, Sergio. Thank you for being the moderator. I want to greet my colleagues here who are participating today and thank Evandro, especially, who has conducted such important work in this Brazil-China connection here at the center in the Rio de Janeiro Law School, and bringing forward these possibilities for us professors to interact. So I watched all of these presentations very closely. You've spoken about credit, investment, and I think the third subject that we should discuss here when thinking of Brazil-China is the international flow of payments. This has been very relevant because of the current situation with the profile of international payments. There are many barriers. So sending money to somebody or a company abroad, it takes a while. It You don't know what kind of fees you have to pay, what kind of currency exchange will be involved. So each financial institution in the market can charge their own fees. They have their own currency exchange rates, and there's a lot of uncertainty around these procedures. So today we have the SWIFT option that connects important financial institutions around the world. And we can see that banks have to traditionally charge higher fees. So with this dynamic of international growth and cooperation in a big international community where we have 250 million people involved in this around the world, we need and we have now more efficient and cheaper alternatives for these international payments. Here in Brazil, this demand is definitely present. You have many Brazilians living abroad, and this is a number that is growing. You have more than 1 million immigrants in the Brazilian territory, so you have a demand, and maybe it's not as big as other countries, but it is something that is growing. So we can see the G20 agenda really thinking about this more, thinking about this logic of developing models and systems for international payments that are faster, cheaper. And when we reduce these costs, this will become more inclusive and generate more benefits for the citizens, and also favor economic growth and international trade. So these payments, they are in fact more complex. I'm not saying this is easy and fast to solve, because these payments involve multiple agents, time differences, different regulations. There are many specific rules that need to be compatibilized in a sense. So what's being done in Brazil to deal with this is a movement that is starting around the world, is looking at these official digital currencies. So this is an idea of starting to work with these official central digital currencies, offering a possibility to start developing a system from zero, from the beginning. So in order to eliminate these frictions between international arrangements, and this payment would of course have its own regulations to establish some kind of digital contract where you can offer transparency and clarity about the costs involved in this payment process. What are the big challenges related to this? Well, you need to think of a technological harmonization and operability and some kind of operational alignment so you can harmonize all of these different formats to create this digital international network. The idea is to start this movement, and Brazil is in this process now. Recently, this was just a very recent discussion, but it has grown a lot over the past few years. And it is in the central bank's radar now. The central bank is thinking of this, and we are thinking of these interconnected systems, thinking about these official digital currencies with national rules connected to the structures that will conduct these payments between the different digital currencies of different countries. So at the end of the day, where does China come in here? China has surpassed many advanced economies in the adoption of digital payments. We look a lot at the Chinese model here in Brazil because China has been able to develop itself greatly in this aspect. So we have seen some tests being conducted in China. Of course, it is a global economic power, and we can see they are working alongside the Chinese central bank as well. So we look at this model where the emission is through the Chinese central bank and the distribution through the public banks. So you have this twofold system, and you can reach the public and reduce this administrative weight that falls on the central bank. This is very important so that the banks can create a currency and avoid a problem of the access limits to money so that they can then offer credits. Another important effect of this digital model is that it is also a way to put more competitive pressure on the market, because the banks will, of course, be promoting this digital currency because they will have a 0% rate. They can be more competitive, and all of these elements that we are observing here in Brazil based on what is happening in China is interesting for us to think of what can happen and what systems can be developed. So I think there is already a first international test that will get started, I think in February of next year. And even if you don't have an international system, if you have an interconnection between these digital currencies, you already have an international application for this, for example, focused on tourism. So this is a first step to make this happen. We are waiting to see what will work. And this is parallel to what Brazil is trying to do as well, to try and organize international payment. We have a project that has not been implemented yet for an international PIX, which is the instant payment system in Brazil. So we are also looking at projects in China for this, and looking at how the banks participate in this distribution function. At the same time, we already see some examples of this happening, like the instant payment international system, the PIX. It comes forward from a wider regulatory model proposed by the central bank in order to make these international payments happen. So there is a project now under the legal framework of the currency exchange market. It was proposed recently, and the idea is for you to have payment institutions and financial institutions in Brazil that can conduct these operations with foreign currency. Of course, there is a limit there. I think it's $100,000, but it's an interesting start. So we can take these steps in the currency exchange market and make this more viable, this instant payment international plan. Some people are not sure about this. They think that this will start to dollarize our economy, that people will start saving their money in dollars, but it means more potential cooperation between countries. So for example, AliExpress is the first international company to accept the Brazilian instant payment system. And this is already important. You can see that really this can promote payments that come from Brazil, and the logistics system is following this as well. Of course, this is just a start. It's just a first step, but it's interesting to see even bigger projects of multiple platforms that deal with these official international currencies. So you have a project that involves Thailand, China, and Hong Kong to build one system where participants in different countries can observe similar rules under this digital infrastructure. And the logic behind this is for you to start to make and to enable this flow of payments between countries, and think of an international arrangement that can work under different models and different currencies. So in the world, we are trying to reduce these costs for international trade, and this can help both Brazil and China to reach a new level, to be more competitive, and to modify the business that we conduct in Brazil today. So from what I heard of the previous presentations, it's very interesting to see all of these factors on credit, investments, payment flow. It's an interesting path, and we need to develop it. And I'm sure that Brazil and China will develop a great partnership for this international arrangement. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you, Professor Carlos. I think this is a very relevant subject, and I'm particularly interested in it, in the subject of the digital currencies. I think that today there's a bit of confusion in the market about what is a cryptocurrency and what is a crypto asset. But I think it really is a relevant subject. The central bank is conducting some webinars about it, but we don't debate it very much because this could really bring a potential disruption of the systems once we have a currency that is not in the bank account anymore, but in any other tool on your cell phone, on a software, hardware. And of course, this will cause a greater digital inclusion. And there is another project that includes Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, and South Africa that's being studied. I think it was interesting for you to mention these projects because China will come forward with the digital yuan. They have conducted tests on this already and different transactions of about $5 billion. And this project is coming forward with a great infrastructure behind it. It's a very interesting concept of the blockchain. Even though this is centralized financing, the concept is blockchain. And alongside 5G, this will really bring forward a new framework for our financial system. I think these are very relevant points. Thank you, Professor, and congratulations for your presentation. So we're going to start our Q&A session now. And I would like to ask you all, I think we highlighted here in this project of the Belt and Road, the diverse opportunities that exist between Brazil and China, not just in the sense of the projects that are connected to trade and commerce, because Brazil today exports about 80% commodities to China, but projects of infrastructure. And there is a project of interests, I would say, of Brazilian interests, which would be the connection of the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean through a railway. And this has been already designed in the past with the Chinese Development Bank conducting this study. And so in Latin America today, we have 19 countries that have adhered to the Belt and Road project. And in Brazil's case, what are the paths that you could suggest to Brazil? You know, thinking of this project and the partnership with these multilateral banks under the point of view of Brazil and the Chinese perspective as well. So how do you think Brazil can further be involved in these projects? So please feel free to answer. Whoever would like to get started, please feel free to jump in. Sergio, can I start? Sure. Great. Well, Sergio, you have a great deal of experience with China and all of us involved in this work, all of us who were able to live or work with China. We've had very diverse experiences, and we have seen the direct foreign investment here, and we know that it's very important within the Chinese logic. Maybe it's a good reference for us, is for us to know our objective, where we want to go. So to define a Brazilian strategy for our relationship in a pragmatic manner within our characteristics, considering our identity, our customs, our Brazilian culture, and how we intend to interact with them. We are one of the top 10 economies in the world, so we do carry a weight and influence. And I recently participated in an unofficial G20 event of financing and local infrastructure, and Brazil does have a very strong voice there, even though many times it does not use that voice or lets another country take that place. But the reality is that we do have the possibility to interact in a very consistent manner. And regarding China, besides the bilateral relationships that have been very interesting, we are also speaking about the BRICS here and the BRICS scope, which is very relevant. And we have our Chinese partners. This is a reality that materializes itself through the BRICS Bank, but thinking of different subjects too, like education, financing, cooperation between many different institutions. And I'm speaking of hundreds of institutions here, and I think that is the case. We need to be responsible and have a responsible long-term vision to understand the world, to understand that the new dynamics that can emerge, the numbers, and when we think of Brazilian numbers and estimating our exports, we need to consider all of this and build a well thought and balanced strategy that is also long-term and considering our characteristics and maintaining good relationships, and of course thinking that it will be implemented as well. So we need to think about whether this is possible within a dialogue in the Belt and Road Initiative, and think about maybe already existing initiatives between multilateral development banks. I was one of the bank's representatives during many years in these meetings. So it's important for Brazilian companies to also be present, but I think we need to think of this pragmatically and have our own vision of how we will insert ourselves in a balanced and efficient way for the country, for Brazil. And if we can have these win-win relationships with our partners, with our Chinese partners who we admire, and long-term partners for Brazil.
Thank you, Sergio. Would anyone else like to make comments comment on this topic? Well, I'd like to ask Ms. Song and Ms. Ng. You've presented something extremely important, showing a kind of depth in a market that is present in China, a market of opportunities for companies that wish to be part of this project. It's interesting, but here in Brazil, there is still a lot of lack of knowledge how the market in China works. So it's interesting to talk about this because, for instance, something that catches our attention that both of you put in your presentation, the interbanking of bonds market in China reached about 6.9 trillion of MMB, that is more than over $1 trillion. And that's just the market of bonds. So if we sum the total bonds emitted in China, the market would reach over 100 trillion of MMBs, the equivalent of $14.5 trillion. So it's an extremely robust market. So in your assessments, I would like to ask, these projects here in Brazil, they're extremely famous, but they're not widespread. So what do you think in terms of your assessment that China could offer to Brazil today, besides the commercial partnership that we have in Brazil today? China is our greatest commercial partner, especially in the export of commodities. But according to your assessment, what do you think that China could add more through these partnerships? Personally, I believe that this financial cooperation is one of the great steps for this. But I would like to, dispute our opinions in terms of a view from China. Please, who would like to start answering?
Okay, I think I have some comments on this topic. Actually, the development of China interbank bond market is in the process of development, and is expected to be open more and more. So it should be it can be expected to be a market that countries like Brazil can consider it as a good place to raise funds for the projects. Take some example. For example, Bond Connect. During the process of develop the bond market, there is a way to doing so is to set up an instrument called Bond Connect, which is a way for the foreign investor to invest in the bond market. So if we're open to if the market can be open to more foreign investor, or if the foreign investor have the opportunity to invest in this market, this market can be expected to grow larger, and it may be helpful for the companies in Belt and Roads to fundraise here. Actually, Chinese bond markets, especially the instrument I mentioned, ABN, is open for the foreign institutions to raise funds there. So I think the interbank bond market will be is a good market for their companies in Belt and Roads or Brazil companies to raise funds there and to facilitate their projects. Thanks.
Som.
Okay, I agree with that. Maybe all over the world knows that Chinese financial market is just on the way to open. So some financial market is still not open to foreign investors. We know that. For example, securities market, there are very limited channels for investors to invest. And just now, I just think maybe there are some ways we can find together to work out some projects in offshore market. Some Chinese companies also find opportunities in offshore market. Why? Because in the internal financial market, we know regulation, still regulation. So that means maybe in the offshore market, there are more opportunities. Okay, just a suggestion for work out some opportunities maybe together in London or Singapore, RMB offshore market. Okay. Professor?
Muito obrigado, Miss Song e Miss Ting.
Thank you so much, Ms. Song and Ms. Ing. We are already coming towards the end of our seminar. So I would like to thank all speakers. Your participation was extremely important. This is an extremely relevant topic. So the offshore market, of course, Hong Kong is now the greatest financial center of China, but there are other 25 financial centers spread around the world that are bringing relevance to the Chinese currency, and Brazil needs urgently, in our opinion, in my opinion, to start to study this more objectively and to create more effective partnerships between the banks of China and Brazil. Differently than China, here the central bank, besides being the conductor of the monetary politics, it is a regulatory moderator. And in China, we have, all these other examples, but there is a need for this, that are all these opportunities available to us, that here in Brazil, we are acting many times with isolated initiatives that are being made. However, it is, a lot more of an effort to put this initiative in place. But here in Brazil, we also need more of a monetary authority from the government and the understanding of these opportunities so that we can increase our partnership and cooperation. I don't know if anyone else would like to say something, but going towards the end of the seminar now, because it's already 9:40 p.m. in Beijing, so it's getting late. I wouldn't like to use any more of your time, and someone else here is in Rome. So I open the floor if anyone else would like to make any comments. If there are no final comments, I thank you all for being here. I wish you all a great evening in Beijing, a great day here in Brazil. Thank you so much for participating, for your presentations, for your presentation here in our webinar. Thank you so much, and you all have a great evening and a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Professor Evandro, acho que ficou só você. O pessoal acabou saindo. Obrigada.
Olá.
Agora.
Obrigada aos tradutores, intérpretes. Que acompanham
Obrigado,
hoje
gente.
também.
Obrigado pelo trabalho.
Oi.
Deixa eu parar minha gravação.
Tudo certo com a gravação, né?